This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
He was a highly decorated career law enforcement officer. A deadly shootout changed his life forever. His personal and professional life began to spiral out of control, and he eventually left law enforcement. And now he's found a unique way to give back to other law enforcement officers and their families. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Today radio show. I'm your host. My name's John J. Wiley. In addition to being a radio broadcaster, I'm a retired police sergeant. For the latest news articles and much more, check out our website, letradioshow.com. In the Law Enforcement Today show, we'll be joined by special guests. We'll be talking about their experiences and issues affecting law enforcement officers, first responders, their families, their community, and victims of horrendous crimes. Be sure to like us on Facebook. Our page is Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Check out the daily articles on our website, letradioshow.com. And while you're there, download our free app. What do you get when you combine social audio with social media all in one free app? It's called Breakout. Get it at letbreak.com. There's a free version for your iPhone and Android devices. Be sure to follow John J. Wiley of the Law Enforcement Today radio show and podcast. Use a profile at LET Radio Show. Get it for free at letbreak.com or at the App Store and Google Play. Calling us from Florida, we have on the phone Brian Regan. Brian is a former law enforcement officer, and we'll get into details about that in a moment. He left a career in law enforcement. He'll tell you all about that. Brian, thanks so much for coming on the Law Enforcement Today show. Very much appreciated.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
It's a pleasure. And we're going to be talking about some things that happen far more often than people tend to realize, and the news media doesn't report it. So this is part of the reason why we have the Law Enforcement Today show, is to provide a platform for people like you to tell their stories. I'm going to paraphrase very, very quickly. Brian was a highly decorated law enforcement officer from Florida. He got into a very bad situation, a violent situation involving a shooting. And I think it's fair to say his personal and professional life began to spiral out of control afterwards. And then he left law enforcement. But he's still giving back to the law enforcement family. So with that, let's talk about what you are doing now, and then we'll get into your story more.
All right. So now I'm co-founder and vice president of a company called 10-6, Advanced Training and Career Development. It's other current and former law enforcement officers that the main vision is to break the stigma of mental health issues in law enforcement. That's the end goal. We offer classes, the physiological effects of stress on first responders, and what to expect, so you can be prepared down the road. So you can have the tools, if you will, to deal with stress.
And a lot of people have no idea about this. We always say civilians, but people who aren't in law enforcement have no idea about the stress and what it does to you, mentally and physically. And also, a lot of our law enforcement officers, especially new law enforcement officers, really have no concept of what could potentially happen to them down the road.
Right. Yeah. I mean, all the subjects that I can remember we were taught in the police academy, none involve stress management or, what to expect when you have a bad call. Fortunately, I grew up with a bunch of older guys, and it was, you had a bad call, and you started, you drank when you came home to get over the hump of that call. But at T6, we have a partnership with Highlight Canyon Campground. It's a campground that probably holds 100 people. We offer classes not only for first responders to show you what stress does to the body, everybody's body, not just, we're special, but we're not special. Mm-hmm. How to deal with that stress so we can expect it. And another big thing is having classes for the spouses of first responders. because that's, not only do law enforcement, we don't usually get the tools to deal with it effectively, but we definitely don't afford our spouses the tools or the knowledge, or they have no clue what we're going through. They just see us coming home in bad moods, throwing things, drinking too much, with no explanation for the behavior.
And I can tell you honestly, in my police career, we never had a class. We never had anything for the spouses, and there was nothing done by the department or other agencies at the time where it was for the couple and how to develop healthier coping skills for the stuff was going to happen and was happening to people like me.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a valuable tool, because if you don't have a good foundation at your house with your family life, then your career it's not going to be too prosperous.
No, and these are things that tie into the epidemic problem we've been having for a long time, for decades, with law enforcement suicide. And I would imagine it's probably a close tie-in with our combat veteran suicide rates and other first responders as well. And when you have stress, traumatic stress, PTS, substance abuse with alcohol, everything goes along with that, then marital problems, and quite often after that, or as a result of all that, suicide becomes an issue.
Yeah, for sure.
Before we get into your story, because it's a dynamite story. You don't want to miss this, folks. Where is T6 located? You've got this campground. I've seen photos of it. It's idyllic. I want to go there. Where can people get more information and where you're located?
We're in Bozeman, Montana.
And what's the name of the campground where you'll be having your retreats?
Canyon, Hyalite, Hyalite Canyon.
And you got to see photos of it. It's the type of place, it's like a postcard, beautiful kind of place. And when I saw that, Brian, I thought to myself, book me a reservation. I don't care when you're having classes. I don't care how long the classes are. I'll be there for a couple hours. Then I'm going to be outside staring at the lake and the mountains. Yeah,
I just came back. We put on our first conference for the Montana Police Protective Association, where we covered various different topics. How stress affects us, getting through the grind. We covered some complex investigations, retention and promotional process issues. We were out there in June, right? I'm from Florida, 97 degrees when I left. And there's 6 inches of snow on the ground, and it's actively snowing. I mean, the most pristine, beautiful place, all-inclusive. You come out there, bedding, food, everything's provided. Like I said, our goal is to give first responders the tools that they need. I'm sure everybody keeps up with the news, so there's don't quote me on the numbers because they're always changing, but 93 law enforcement officer suicides this year, and there's been 55 in the line of duty deaths. It's almost double the amount of suicides than in the line of duty.
And that's been a problem since way before I was a rookie. And I can't quote the actual date, but I had a guest on the Law Enforcement Show quite a while ago, Dr. Robert Douglas, National Police Suicide Foundation, and he's retired Baltimore City Police. I actually worked with him many, many years ago. And he said the first commissioned study to study law enforcement suicide was by Mayor LaGuardia of New York City back in the 1930s, because that's how big of a problem was way back then. And people act like it's a current issue. It is not. It's been going on a very long time. This is the Law Enforcement Today Show. We're going to take a short break. We're talking with Brian Regan. We're going to talk about his law enforcement career, what happened, and where he's at now. This is the Law Enforcement Today Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
There was social media, and then there was social audio. Now the Breakout app combines the best of both. Best of all, the Breakout app is free with versions for iPhone and Android devices. You can download the app for free at the App Store and Google Play, or you can download for free at www.letbreak.com.
Are you wondering where you can find more great podcasts? Head to letradioshow.com, click Be Heard, and discover other fantastic podcasts like this one. Also available on our free app, all at letradioshow.com.
Back to the Law Enforcement Today Show. I'm John J. Wiley, joined by Brian Regan, calling us from Florida. Brian, you are with an organization, it's called 10-6, correct?
Correct.
what is your website? Where can people get more information about what you do, what you offer, and everything else?
The website is off-shift.com, and all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, as T6 Advanced Training and Career Development.
And when you say T6 Advanced Training and Development, it sounds highly technical. And there are parts of what you do that are very industry specific, but there's also a lot that you do that covers stress resiliency, how to combat these things, the post-traumatic stress problems are going on, how to prevent that. We'll talk more about that again in a few moments. Before we get into that conversation, I want to talk about your law enforcement career. You were a Brevard County, Florida Sheriff's Deputy, correct?
Correct.
How long were you with the agency?
14 years.
That's a long time. You were more than a seasoned veteran. You were like salty at 14 years.
Yeah, very salty towards the end, actually.
And unfortunately, that's what happens. Salty can be a very good thing when you have what we use terms like old school police, salty, and then you have salty where it's just a really bad attitude, and it's not always a positive. I'll let you handle that part. Before we go too deep into this, give us a bird's eye view of your career from start to finish.
So I got hired October 30th of 2000. I didn't let grass grow under my feet. I was a go-getter. I was young, proactive, not reactive. So after 2 years, I made FTO. I had 17 trainees while I was an FTO. A lot of were fourth phase, didn't know if we were going to have retention issues with them or not, or if they were going to have to be terminated. So more of a problem solver. 2 years after that, I made corporal, and I did 9 years as corporal. And I went into the K-9 unit for 2 years, back to the road for about a year, and then I left January 31st of 2014.
And when you left voluntarily, but there were certain things that happened in your career. You said you became salty and not in a good way. So, certainly, obviously, things happened in your career. I, too, was a very proactive, very aggressive officer, and there's a burnout phase after a while. But when you do that, when you're that type of police officer and you're in a high-crime area, there's a lot of violence and things, you're going to expose a lot of the violence, and you're going to get use of force issues. You're going to have complaints. You're going to see a lot of death and dying, and those things take a definite toll on you. Is that an understatement?
No, that's definitely true. And the culture in law enforcement is you deal with it with dark humor and alcohol, usually post-shift. You know, that's how you gauge how bad of a day you had based upon how much you drank when you came home to try to alleviate the memory or the thought of it out of your brain. In my case, I'll tell you a little bit about the incident. It was June 11th, 2010. We received a phone call of a man who was threatening his wife and himself with a firearm. I was the corporal on shift. 2 deputies get there first. Me and another deputy are right behind each other, and we're headed to the scene. Those 2 deputies, we learn that the female is actually across the street, so the male is inside the house by himself. 2 deputies make entry, and the gentleman fires 2 rounds down the hallway where the deputies were coming down to confront the subject inside of his bedroom. The 2 deputies turn around and are running out of the house. This is about the time me and the other deputy are walking up, and they run behind cover. The bad guy that came out of the house, he was armed with a pearl-handled revolver, and he didn't see us out of his peripheral because he was looking at the people that were directly in front of him. We were to his hard left.
Mm-hmm.
And all the stuff that they teach in the academy about how everything during stressful incidents, how everything slows down, tunnel vision, it was all true. My hearing wasn't affected, although there was more than 40 rounds fired. I can tell you where all 4 of my rounds went. Everything was in. It was ridiculous how at least that part of the police academy, everything was true. So then we had to render first aid because that's part of the game. So it took about 30 seconds. He was done. He was deceased.
I get what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. that's what we do. You have to use deadly force, and then you try to render aid to save their life. And it's a contradiction. People don't get it, but that's what you're trained to do, and you follow your training. It kicks in like instinctually.
Right. It's like, hey, I just shot this guy because I was in fear for my life and the life of my deputies, but yet now I'm over here trying to stop the blood. There was no stopping it anyway, but yeah, it is definitely, it's a psychological nightmare. It doesn't make sense, really.
No, it doesn't.
You're trying to hurt somebody, and now you're trying to save them, but it's what we do.
And I can tell you from my own experience that when there was really, really bad, violent situations, it was really... I don't owe anybody any apologies. I'll never apologize for what I had to do. Do I have regrets? I wish I didn't have to do the things I did, but I did them because I had to, just to survive. But there was almost like a primitive... I don't know the words to use. I've never come up with them. It's almost like a primitive celebration inside that, yeah, you tried to kill me and I made it and I conquered you. And that, I think, is where the contradiction really starts, because that's not how I feel walking around. That's not how I am normally. But in life and death situations, you act totally different. It's a very primitive thing.
Yeah, it's definitely, I survived an armed encounter, or I was involved in an armed encounter and I survived. But yet it doesn't really feel that way. And
you said something else about the auditory things. The best description I've come up with is I remember one really bad situation, and my partner, who was in a car with me at the time, he was yelling for me not to get out of the car. He told me that later on, but it's almost as if, you know how you're in like the living room or the kitchen and the television's on in the living room a couple rooms away, and you hear the volume in the background. You hear people talking, but it doesn't register what they're saying. It's almost as if they're in another room. That's how it was. He was yelling at the top of his lungs, and I barely heard it. Yeah, it was the auditory and the slow motion. I mean, I was watching bullets ricochet off the ground and off the wall, whereas I don't believe in a normal situation you would have been able to see anything like that. No, that always strikes me as odd, because I've never encountered that, and I'm not laughing because I know how police are, and they'll always say, especially ones who haven't been in the situation, they're the first ones to go, "Well, that sounds ridiculous. How would you even know that?" And I always say, "Were you there?" And their response is no, and then I politely say, "Then shut your pie hole." That's it. Because no one knows how they're going to react unless they were there at that time, seeing and experiencing things from your perspective. Right. Shortly after that, I got awarded the Medal of Valor. Probably for the next 6 months after that, it's almost like you're on cloud nine. You get to talk about it all the time. Everybody wants to know about it. Everybody wants to know the details. And then after about that 6 month period, nobody really cares anymore. So going back to how we deal with stress in the culture of law enforcement, usually by dark humor, alcoholism, a lot of inappropriate things, I describe it almost like every traumatic incident or every incident that affected me personally, and it affects other people differently. It's like I built a house with them. I never dealt with all these blocks of problems. I just built a house. And after that 6 month period of time, that house, of all the problems I had dealt with my entire career and this traumatic shooting that I had been through, everything had collapsed all at one time, and I was forced to deal with it. And I really had no idea what I was actually dealing with. I just know my attitude towards the department totally changed. My attitude towards work, my attitude towards the people at work. I mean, I loved that place. I loved everybody there, and it seemed like overnight my whole demeanor, and, it was definitely noticed. On that note, Brian, we're going to take a short break. This is the Law Enforcement Today Show. We're talking with Brian Regan, is a former law enforcement officer from Florida. This is the Law Enforcement Today Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Have you ever wanted to listen to a favorite Law Enforcement Today episode again? Or chat directly with John J. Wiley? Now you can. Download Podopolo for free on either app store and send John J. Wiley a DM right on the app. That's Podopolo. Podopolo.
Hey, folks, when you have a chance, check out our Facebook page. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. When you get there, click like and follow. That's click like and follow Law Enforcement Today Radio Show on Facebook. Back to our conversation with Brian Regan. Brian is a former law enforcement officer from Brevard County, Florida Sheriff's Department. Brian, before we went to break, you were talking about how you loved the job for a very long time. You went through this traumatic, horrible shooting. The guy died, and 6 months or so later, you began to change, and your attitudes began to change, and your coping mechanisms began to change. Let's talk a little bit more about that. The drinking was always an issue. That's how we dealt with everything back in the day. And for some people, they were fine. And for other people, myself included, it became an even bigger problem, and I had to give it up because it was creating more issues than it was solving.
Yeah, I would definitely drink when I was there, but when I left, it became excessive. So about 6 months after the incident, like I said, my demeanor, everything, attitude towards the sheriff's office changed, and I really didn't know why. I tried to seek help with our EAP. Unfortunately, the laws had just changed. We didn't have a lot of funding, so EAP went from used to be able to go see an actual medical doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist, to now you could only go see a social worker. Well, I wanted to go. At the time, I wanted to go see somebody that had walked in my shoes before, and I wasn't going to go see somebody that moonlights as a law enforcement social worker, probably does divorce, marital relations during the day. That wasn't who I wanted to go see.
That's pretty common. It's a real common thing I hear in the show quite a bit, and I went through that too, where it's almost like going to the barbecue or the cocktail party, and people find out you're police, and they go, "Oh, did you ever shoot anybody?" They ask the dumbest questions. And what I've heard is when people deal with therapists who are not acutely trained and experienced and aware of the traumas that law enforcement officers and first responders and military veterans go through, it is the same sort of scenario. It's almost as if you're being judged and you get stupid questions, which no one wants to sit there and answer.
Yeah, so my solution to the problem was there was a position in the K-9 unit that came open, and I won't say that if you get in shooting or something high profile like that, you can write your own ticket to any department or any division you want to, but I decided I want to go to the K-9 unit. I'm not saying I wasn't qualified, but so I go to the K-9 unit, and I'm still feeling the isolation, the depression, the anxiety of going to work. We train every other week for a full day. And when you don't have your head in the game, and it's a 15-person unit, I mean, you guys all have to gel, or you become an outsider. So I went from decorated, liked deputy to an outsider because of the demeanor and the attitude that I had. That's just what I brought to work. So I'd never been in trouble before. Never, no documentation, no verbal counseling, no nothing. I got my first 3 when I was in the K-9 unit, 2 from car accidents, and 1 because I thought it would be cute to try to fist fight a deputy in the wash rack at the shop.
That never goes over well.
No, administration did not like that one.
And we've had people back in the day in our department, in the Baltimore Police Department, when there was disputes, they were often settled on the district parking lot in the garage. Not often. Most of the time we could talk to each other, but there was always a couple guys that when push came to shove, if they got pushed too far, they snapped.
Yeah, it was like I had my back against the wall already because I didn't know what I was feeling. I didn't know why I all of a sudden did not want to go to work at all. So that's how I dealt with it.
Was that like a light switch being thrown? You went from really loving the job to within a few months you hated it?
Really jaded.
do you understand why at this point? I mean, at the time, I'm sure you didn't. But now, when you look back and after all you've been through, did you see something that happened, or maybe that could have intervened that would have changed things?
If I would have asked for help, whether it would have been the help that I thought I needed, it would have started something. It would have started, the conversation. But the stigma of having a mentally unstable law enforcement officer in your agency is not something that any administration wants to even deal with.
In ours, what they would do, if you walked in and you said, I'm stressed out, I got stress problems, or I'm not dealing with my emotions well, the first thing they did was you had your police power suspended and you were what we call rubber gunned, and you put on a desk job where you're answering calls and doing police reports over the phone. And everybody knew. Yeah, that definitely has to change. So after about 2 years in the K-9 unit, I could see the writing on the wall. I was drawing way too much attention to this small little K-9 unit that had pretty nice work set up. So I tendered my resignation from the unit after 2 years, and I ended up going back to the same precinct that I worked at before, up in Titusville. So I start out on day shift. I worked day shift for probably about 5 months, and I still have this attitude. My give a darn button was smashed. There was I didn't care about anything. All I wanted was for a supervisor to say something that I didn't like, and I would lash out knowing that I'm not going to win that fight. But I waited for it. So we put in, I limp my way through day shift, put in for shift vids. We do every year. And I put in for day shift because that was the shift I was on. It seemed like I was doing, I was able to maintain after there for a couple months. But lo and behold, I got my fourth choice, which was midnight shift. Which, by the way, I hated. I hated midnight shift. I know guys and gals who loved it and they thrived on it. Me, I never could get the sleeping patterns down right. And we changed like every 28 days. And it was brutal. Yeah,
I know some people that switch like every 3 months now. It'd be horrible for childcare issues. Anyway, so I went to the commander and asked why me, with my tenure, I'm being overlooked. It's not like I was at the precinct with a bunch of older guys. I was pretty senior, and I've got the needs of the agency explanation. We understand what you wanted, but the needs of the agency outweighed it. So I could start to tell that my bad attitude was also rubbing off on this precinct. It's like I was the cancer. You can't run a shift. You got that one guy that's always Debbie Downer that doesn't want to participate in a group, always cutting corners, going home early, calling in sick all the time, erratic behavior. So I did that for about 3 months on midnight shift, and the commander called me in his office and he said, he was actually my sergeant when I first got hired. He's like, I've known you since you got hired. This is not you. What's going on? So I briefly told him, I'd been seeing a doctor and I had some medications, got switched, and I just needed some time. He said, well, how much time do you need? And I said, I probably had 2 weeks left of vacation because I was using it every chance I could to not come into work. So he goes, okay, take 2 weeks vacation and come back and be your old self again. And I knew probably as soon as I walked out of that office that day that I was never going to come back. It was so bad when I was in the K-9 unit, I would be putting my boots on to go to work, and I would be crying because I did not want to go to work. And I tried to hide it from my wife, and that's how she got on. She was so supportive for me to leave. She saw the pain that I was going through. The suicidal thoughts were ridiculous.
And we got to take a break on that note. This is Law Enforcement Show. We're talking with Brian Regan, former law enforcement officer. It's a lot more of the conversation you don't want to miss. We'll be right back. This portion of the Law Enforcement Today radio show is brought to you in part by Pet Rescue Life Facebook page. Everyone's welcome at the Pet Rescue Life Facebook page, where you'll find fun, informative, and enjoyable posts daily. Purebred, mixed breeds, rescues, we love them all. Be sure to like the Pet Rescue Life Facebook page. Back to our conversation with Brian Regan. Brian's a former sheriff's corporal from the Brevard County Sheriff's Office in Brevard County, Florida. Brian, before we went to commercial break, you talked about towards the end of your law enforcement career, you were actually crying when you're putting on your boots to go to work, and the things that you were experiencing. Can you recap what those were?
I felt alone. I felt that I couldn't go to anybody and talk to them, because in that profession you can't. You got to be you have to be the strong one. You can't be the weak one. So I felt that there was nothing I could do. I could leave, which ultimately I did, or I could announce that I had a problem and everybody can learn about my problem. And it might work, it might not, it might end my career, it might not. I wanted to do it my way. I wanted to have control over my own career.
Yeah, that's something all of us want. And psychologists and psychiatrists, I've heard, really don't like that term control. But for anybody I know in law enforcement, we may not have started off that way, but we certainly ended up that way, where we're on a desperately to try to control our own environment and our own lives. And because so much of what you do every day is beyond your control. Who lives, who dies, violence. You arrest someone, they're let back out a couple hours later, and they wind up doing the same thing again. You're powerless. So wanting control of your own destiny, I think, is a normal thing.
Yeah. So I left. I called. So I take my 2 weeks. I called after the 2 weeks. I was supposed to head back to work that night. I called the lieutenant on duty. I told him what I was doing. He said, "Okay, come down here." It was nice because I didn't get any opposition. Hindsight, maybe there could have been some interjection on his part. So within the 3 hour period, I had returned my car, my gun, my computer, everything that I had ever owned or been given from the sheriff's office had all been given back, and the last thing I was owed was my last and final paycheck. So 2 days go by, and I talked to a commander. He was actually my commander when I was up in Titusville for a bunch of years. We're still friends now, but he knew that I was struggling mentally with what I had to do. Plus, I didn't tell anybody that I was leaving. I literally called the on-duty lieutenant and left. I tried to do it as stealthily as possible, so I didn't have to explain, because that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
You know? So they send, about 2 days later, two guys come to my house from Staff Services, Internal Affairs, and they're like, "Hey, fill out this workers' comp form. We're going to send you to a guy that does evaluations for the military people when they come back from overseas. He's in Melbourne." Okay, no problem. I fill out the form. I start to go see this guy in Melbourne, and I don't know, I'm probably seeing him for 3 months. And he tells me, he's like, "Hey man, I don't know how to break this to you. I know you don't have a lot of money and you just left your job, but the sheriff's office that was supposed to pay for this only paid for the first 2 visits. And mind you, I was seeing him twice a week for 2 hours at a time. So that's 4 hours a week."
Would it be safe to say that you desperately needed that help at that point?
Oh yeah, definitely. And he that's what he said. He goes, "I know you don't have it, and I'm gonna help you anyway." But I took that as the scabs have been ripped off again. You know, this agency that I gave everything for, I thought was taking care of me, and then come to find out they paid for 2 visits out of, I don't know, probably 30 visits that had happened.
And I'm sure you heard, just like I did, when you're a rookie, you're in the academy from day one, if something bad happens to you, we got your back, we'll take care of you. And I firmly believed that for so long. But then I found out what that really meant was, if you were killed in line of duty, that your family would be taken care of. If you were injured physically, and or worst case, mentally, you're on your own.
Yeah, we definitely have to self-police. The agency, they tell you one thing, but they're out for themselves. We have to look out for each other. And these are all things that we teach at T6 and that I've learned over my career. So I would get to my complete rock bottom. So after I learned this from my therapist, I didn't have much money at all, and I live an hour away. So it was costing a lot of money in gas, not to mention the fact that I just got told that I owed probably $4,000 or $5,000, and the guy's wife does the books and wasn't too happy. So I'm going to go see my sergeant, who was the sergeant when I first got hired. I love the guy, still friends with him today. One of the only two people that I'm actually still friends with. That's another issue. But so I'm driving down the road, and I get in a little fender bender, and my beverage falls on the floor. And due to my beverage of choice, I had the fight or flight syndrome, and I decided that I was going to flee. Next thing you know, I'm being called by my deck commander. Were you just in a traffic crash at XYZ location? Yeah. Okay. The police department came over to the house I was at. I ended up being charged with leaving the scene of an accident with property damage and failure to use due care. That was bad. That was real bad. I'm on the other side of the law,
right?
And now I'm being charged with a crime.
And now I'll be honest with you, Brian. That makes me very sad. That a healthy contributing member of our law enforcement agencies, that's what happens, and that for so often we become our own worst enemies and do things that put people we worked with in a really bad position where they have to do something they don't want to do.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
So I ended up.
It's embarrassing. It's like I would feel ashamed of myself, and I hate for anybody to feel that way.
Oh yeah, I wanted. The only reason why I didn't commit suicide I had planned it while I was working because I'm well versed on if you kill yourself, nobody gets your life insurance.
Right.
So it was going to look like a car accident. That's how it was going to happen at work. When I left the sheriff's office, I really had no plan other than your typical ways. But my son being raised by somebody else and not having a father, and my wife not having a husband, that was the only thing that kept me from doing it. So obviously very traumatic. I don't talk to anybody from the sheriff's office, nor did I at that time. I'm sure I could imagine what the rumors were. So I had to I pled no contest, and I pled absentia, which means I couldn't show up to court. There was no way I could show up to court. That is overseen by the Brevard County Sheriff's Office, the
Right.
people I used to work with. There's
Right.
no way it could happen. So I got sentenced to 100 hours community service, and I had to take a 12-hour driver improvement class, and then the charges were all dismissed.
Well, I'm glad that part happened, but that doesn't erase where you got to. And you just turned rock bottom. And I can't imagine it being much worse than that, except maybe having your gun in your hand, thinking of ending it at that point.
Yeah. So that was probably about 2 years after I'd left. I mean, I had to find a purpose, because there's two things also that they don't teach in the police academy. Is when you leave the sheriff's office, or at least when I left the sheriff's office, and from their last conference, I think it's more universal than we think. The two things most that I was not prepared for was that the total disconnect from your friends and what you thought were your family and law enforcement once you leave. I don't talk. I had friends. I mean, and I don't talk. I know phones work both ways. I can call them just as good as they can call me. I've never hung up on their phone calls, but that and your purpose. I needed a purpose in life. So actually the originator of T6, Jesse Holton, my wife called. I was at a bar. He had gotten sober, and the bartender ended up calling my wife. He comes out, he brings me home. He tells me, this is what we're going to do. He gave me the vision of T6. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago. he gave me the visions of T6 at the time, and that all I needed to do was go back to school, get my education, because I went from high school to the police academy, and give up the drinking.
That's a pretty tall task.
Yeah.
But you did it.
Yeah.
You know what? We're out of time, Brian, and I'm going to have you back to talk more about your mission afterwards, because that's just as enlightening of a story. Before we say goodbye, give us the website address where people get more details about T6 again.
T6's website is off-shift.com, and on all the social media platforms, it's T6 Advanced Training and Career Development.
Brian Regan, thanks so much for coming on the Law Enforcement Today show. Very much appreciated, brother.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to thank our guests so much for coming on the Law Enforcement Today radio show. The Law Enforcement Today radio show is a nationally syndicated radio show broadcast on numerous stations once a week and growing. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, please do me a big favor. Tell a friend. I'll be back in just a couple days with a brand new episode of the Law Enforcement Today radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.